Minister, thank you very much for this CNBC exclusive. So I want to start by asking you about the growing relationship between India and the ASEAN nations. We've seen a lot of high-profile government officials visiting the region of late, whether it was the India-Singapore Ministerial Roundtable. Prime Minister Modi was here recently in the last couple of weeks. What has been the key objective behind these high-profile visits?
Well, I think Singapore has always been one of our most trusted and reliable partners. Over the last 60 years of diplomatic relations with Singapore, we've had serious engagement, whether it's on the geopolitical front, whether it's in our development journey in terms of investments, in terms of technology, particularly given the cultural and people-to-people ties between the two nations. There's a lot of affinity for Singapore. You feel very much at home here. And we find the work that Singapore has done in different areas, whether it's in the logistics space, ports, the airport, in the fintech and finance world, the way their sovereign wealth funds have contributed to India's own growth story. We believe that this is a trusted partner with whom we'd like to do much more.
There is a growing view, sir, among the fraternity out here that you are looking at Singapore as a gateway to building stronger ties with broader ASEAN nations. What do you have to say about that? You're also opening the Invest India office today in Singapore.
This interview.
That's right. So could you tell us more about what areas are you looking at collaborating in?
Well, the ASEAN region is very important for India. The centrality of the ASEAN region in the Indo-Pacific, in the geopolitical situation in this region is recognized by one and all. We have very strong ties with almost all the ASEAN countries. I've just come into Singapore in transit from the ASEAN Economic Ministers Conference and the India-ASEAN Summit. Singapore within the ASEAN region plays a very important role of not only being the financial powerhouse, but also a big influential voice in the ASEAN region. And therefore, one can call it the gateway, one can call it a sounding board to see what more we can do with the ASEAN region. But given the close ties that we have with Singapore over so many years, I think within the ASEAN region also, they help smoothen the edges and help us get closer to different countries in the ASEAN region. So undoubtedly, Singapore is very important to our scheme of things. And in the overall context, ASEAN also, in the long run, will be important for India, both as a trading partner and as a friend.
When Prime Minister Modi was here, Minister, a few weeks ago, there was much talk about India's Act East policy. And I want to understand a little bit more about that in terms of enhancing trade and investment with this part of the world, because we do understand the India-Middle East corridor is very active, the India-Europe corridor and the India-US corridor is very active. Is this a diversification strategy given the slowdown risks that the Western economies are facing?
No, this was stated and accepted as our government's policy 10 years ago. The Look East and the Act East policy was enunciated almost in the first year of our government 10 years back. We do believe that the West has a very important role to play in India's development journey, whether it's Europe, whether it's the United States. They are our big trading partners. They have a huge investment interest in India. There's tremendous amount of technologies coming out from there. We have strategic interests with those countries, and over the years have built them up. The Act East policy was also enunciated in terms of our cultural identity with the eastern part of the world. It was also to do with growing trade opportunities, growing economic opportunities in the eastern part of the world. And I think Prime Minister Modi is today respected as a world leader for the very fine balance in terms of relations. It could be a large country like the United States, where he is today, or it could be a small Brunei, which he visited only a few days back. He has balanced all relationships and earned the trust of the world. No wonder today he is recognized as the most popular leader of the world.
Indeed. Minister, I do want to ask you, as you look to build relations with the broader ASEAN nations, would you reconsider joining RCEP? Has RCEP come up in discussions? Have the members of ASEAN suggested you join RCEP?
Well, earlier, between 19 and let's say 22, 23, in every meeting they used to try to persuade me and the government to reconsider joining RCEP. I think of late they have recognized that India is not going to join the RCEP because neither did it reflect the guiding principles on which RCEP was started, nor is it in the nation's interest to do a free trade agreement with China. And when I got into the Commerce and Industry Ministry in June of 2019, we were at the fag end of negotiations of the RCEP. November 4th was the day we were to all accept joining the RCEP. So I got only about 3 or 4 months to really get a hang on what was happening. But very clearly I could see that it was not in the nation's interest. It was not in our farmers' interest. RCEP did not reflect the aspirations of our small and micro medium industries, MSME sector. And in some form was nothing but a free trade agreement with China. Because at that point of time, we already had an FTA with the ASEAN bloc of 10 countries. We already had an FTA with Japan and Korea. The Australia FTA was on the verge of finalization. Instead of finalizing that, we put that into the back burner and focused on RCEP. And New Zealand, we don't have much business interest. At that point of time, the total bilateral trade was about $300 million. So effectively, the only country left was China. And certainly nobody back home would like to have an FTA with a non-transparent economy, very opaque in its economic practices, where both trading systems, political systems, the economy, the way it is managed is completely different from
Minister,
what the democratic world wants.
Minister, you don't think if you pushed for a hard bargain that you could get your terms and conditions in RCEP? This is what actually a noted economist in the region, Kishore Mahabubani, has highlighted, that actually RCEP can be beneficial for India with a hard bargain.
Well, I think very often when you see from the lens sitting outside the country, you don't realize how difficult it is to compete against a non-transparent economy which uses the World Trade Organization most favored nation MFN policy to its advantage and floods different economies or countries with goods at abysmally low prices, very often not even meeting up to quality standards. And the impact that non-transparent economies can have on, let's say, India's growth story, especially with predatory pricing possible. We've seen that happening in many products. In fact, when we were negotiating RCEP, we had a series of meetings. In one of the meetings with my Chinese counterpart, we were both having coffee. And I actually picked up the cup and I told him, you know, the cup that we see on the shelves in India is often made from China. And the price at which you manufacture, you ship, and you retail in India is less than the cost of raw materials in our country. How can you manage that? And very smugly he said that this is our efficiency. I said, fine, is it okay then that we agree that anytime we want information about how you are able to efficiently do that, or whether the payment for that is fully made from India, and we want details of the transaction, will you be willing to share with us? He said, that's not possible. That's our internal matter.
So you want more transparency in trade?
So obviously that day I could sense very clearly that everything is not kosher.
Okay, so RCEP is a no. I do want to also talk about India's semiconductor policy, Minister, because we had Prime Minister Modi recently say that India will do everything that is needed to push forward its investment in chips and building the chips infrastructure. Chips are the new oil. So, what is your sense on that?
Well, Prime Minister Modi recently at a Semicon India conference made a very prophetic statement when he said that we would like to see every device in the world with an Indian-made chip. And I think that's the kind of ambitions, that's the kind of super goals that Prime Minister Modi is known to set for the country. And that's what drives this country, the entrepreneurial spirit, the innovation that you are seeing, the enthusiasm amongst the youth in the country. They feel very empowered and very, very much encouraged with Prime Minister Modi coming with bold vision and big targets. In a way, as they say, big, hairy, audacious goals that he sets for us.
Right.
And we recognize that the world is changing with newer and newer technologies increasingly coming into our lives, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, or technology-based manufacturing. All of these are going to transform our lives and the way we do our work. And in that situation, I can clearly see that semiconductors will play an important role. Fortunately, India has a big presence. Indians have a big presence in the entire value chain. So when you visit Applied Materials in the US, in Silicon Valley, you see lots of Indians at different management positions, technical positions, on the shop floor, in the office. And that story is the same in almost every company related to the semicon industry. And which is why we feel that this talent can also and will also contribute to the India story. We are encouraging semiconductor industry in a big way. We have started building up the ecosystem, which is essential before we can see more and more foundries coming into the country for the actual chip making. Tata's is setting up one foundry in Assam. And I think the interest in the India semiconductor industry is growing by leaps and bounds. And we see Singapore also playing an important role in this journey.
And I would want you to talk a little bit more about that, in terms of how you can collaborate with Singapore and other ASEAN nations in achieving your chip ambitions, sir. And what role do you see India playing in the global chip value chain, primarily because the US dominates chip design, Taiwan dominates chip manufacturing, ASML, which is a Dutch company, it has a monopoly in chip equipment manufacturing, right? AEM, of course, over here in Singapore does that. And then when it comes to critical minerals, rare earths that go into chips, China produces 70% of that. So where does India fit in, and how do you define India's role in this?
In the coming years, you will see more and more change in this entire ecosystem. For example, the US first offshored to Malaysia a lot of the work on semiconductor. They had that MOU with Malaysia on semiconductors. Last year, my counterpart Gina Raimondo and I also entered into an MOU where America agreed that they would like India to be a partner with them in their future semiconductor journey. Similarly, Singapore, Dutch, all of these countries recognize that it's important to have talent, skills, and a large demand base when it comes to their future investments in the semiconductor industry. India is a country with 1.4 billion people, young nation. Our average age is 28.4 years. Aspirational, with their basic day-to-day needs being met over the last 10 years. The youth of India connected with the world through their phones and television are now looking for the good things of life. And the semiconductor industry gets into all of those good things of life that a youth of today demands. Therefore, the demand that India will provide in the years in the future is going to be phenomenal. We expect the demand for semiconductor products to be about $100 billion by 2030 and will grow exponentially thereafter. And in that scenario, I think more and more companies recognize that given the talent pool, given the skill sets of the people in India, given the infrastructure that Mr. Modi and his government have created over the last 10 years, given the strong macroeconomic fundamentals on which investments in India give good returns, and given the fact that the fastest growing large economy in the world, with the advantage, the 3Ds, democracy, rule of law, demographic dividend and demand, is a very compulsive case to grow this industry. And my sense is that with the flow of investments that we are seeing, and the number of young Indians who want to come back to India and start their entrepreneurial journey or come back to India with new ideas as startups or innovators, is going to define this industry in the years to go.
But would it be specifically on the manufacturing side, offshoring?
It will be the value chain.
Okay,
the
entire
ecosystem, whether it's design. In fact, design, if you see even now, almost all semiconductor industry has offices in India which is focused on design. And every one of them who comes and meets me gives me both numbers. We have 3,000 people in our India office, and in the next 2 years, it's going to be 6,000, it's going to be 8,000, and we have...
Wondering which company is that, sir?
Almost every company that comes and meets me.
Okay.
In fact, I'm told that half the Fortune 500 companies today have GCCs back home in India today. In some form or the other, their global capacity centers are moving, particularly post-COVID, when people have realized that with work from home being so successful, it really doesn't matter where the person is situated. It's the output that matters.
But at some point in time, just taking one more question on this, at some point in time, do you think India can compete with Taiwan? Not in terms of perhaps the scale and dominance, but in terms of being, we say China plus one in manufacturing of other important products. But when it comes to chips, can India be Taiwan plus one?
Why not? With the talent that we have in India, and the fact that the world recognizes that over-concentration in any one region is fraught with very serious geopolitical risks. Whereas India, with its size, scale, as I said, democracy, the rule of law, is it's like a safe harbor. It provides an alternative where you will always have a youthful population, you'll have huge demand, and you'll have the rule of law to back you up. I think that's a very compulsive case which makes it an attractive destination. And then all of us are working to make the journey smoother, to give a red carpet in actual on-the-ground services. We are starting the office in Singapore, which will start from Singapore serving the ASEAN region. And it's not just Invest India. We'll have Invest India, we'll have NICDIC, the organization which is creating 20 new industrial smart cities, the National Industrial Corridors Development Company. Then we'll have a representative of our Commerce Ministry, the Director General of Foreign Trade, coming in here to promote trade. And ultimately, in my mind, I also believe that we'd like to have somebody who can promote tourism, not as in having road shows on tourism or something, but connecting with the right people, getting the right people on board in terms of travel agents recommending India, the e-commerce sites talking about India. So our effort is to have a holistic office, and Singapore is just the beginning. Next step is Dubai, where we've identified the location. Then it'll be Zurich. After that, New York. Then we are looking at possibly Japan, London. So it's going to be, and then the Silicon Valley, where we have a large Indian population. So it's trade, technology, investment, and tourism. And these four will collectively define India's outreach to the world.
Got it. Your four cores, basically. I do want to touch upon the India-UK trade deal, the impending trade deal between India and the United Kingdom. There is a round of negotiations, I believe, coming up in October. What can we expect from that?
I have had 2 meetings with my new counterpart, Mr. Reynolds. I met him before the UK elections when he was the Shadow Minister for Trade. We had a wonderful late night coffee and dessert meeting where we discussed the contours of what we were doing. And he had agreed and he had committed to me that they were equally excited. The Labour Party was equally keen to conclude the deal.
I'm hearing that they really want to spur this into action. They really want to get this done. Do you sense
That's
that
the
eagerness?
sense I got even before the election. And
Okay.
post-election, we met in Italy at the G7 trade ministers meeting. And we had lovely discussions. A young, very sweet young man. And I think I'll enjoy working with him. And he's still getting a grip on the subject. Since I was already on the job, I didn't need to get as briefed about it again. But he's just getting a hang on the UK-India relationship. Like, we are hoping that we'll start again. But as I've said on more than one occasion, a trade deal is never done with a gun on the head, either to UK or to India. We must go about it slowly, systematically. We have to protect national interests and sensitivities on both sides. And therefore, trade deals have to be carefully calibrated to make them fair, equitable, balanced, meeting the interests of both nations, recognizing the future, the different positions that each partner will have in the future.
What could help seal the deal, sir?
I think a deeper understanding on the UK side that the India opportunity growing from a $3.5 trillion economy to a $35 trillion economy in the next 25 years or thereabouts, versus the UK economy growing from a $4 trillion to a $8 trillion economy in the similar period, which is almost a reality. Every projection seems to suggest that kind of possibility. 8 could at best become 9 or 10. That vastly different opportunity that a 65, 70 million population and 140 million, 1.4 billion population, that is 70 million largely satiated and satisfied aging population versus a youthful, aspirational India. I think this recognition will help bring balance to the deal and help us seal the deal faster.
So from what I'm understanding, reports suggest that UK is of course looking at more market access for its products at lower taxes in India. And India on its part wants more concessions on UK's migration policy for movement of people for work and education. Do you think India has made enough of a compromise on its side? And being friends, UK and India are friends, that both of them can actually arrive at a happy compromise?
First of all, both sides need to compromise and nobody needs to compromise. Why should there be a compromise? We'll both look at a win-win deal.
Okay.
Which will be good for them, it should be good for us.
There has to be some give and take.
Give and take is always there, but give and take can result in wins on both sides. I don't personally believe there's any compromise either for UK or for India. It's only the recognition of the situation today, and we need to crystal gaze into the future. And I think the Lego pieces will fall in place.
But you will still not tell me what's the key sticking point.
Sticking points can be many. Sticking points can be big, they can be small. Right. Everything is possible. And therefore, identifying one as a key sticking point would be very unfair. I think we should wait and allow negotiators the elbow room to discuss, negotiate, come up with what's best in the interest of both trading partners.
So you're not in a hurry? You're not
Never.
set a timeline?
Never.
But you sense more eagerness from the Labour government versus its predecessor?
That would be unfair for me to comment on, because I think there is eagerness on both sides, but there's a recognition on both sides that we should allow this to happen in a fair and systematic manner. I would never try to put an attribute to any of my trading partners that they are more eager or I am more eager. I think both are eager, but yet both are happy and willing, because trade deals are for the long run. A month, 2 months, a year or 2 years don't really affect that much. Though I believe that deals close faster actually happen. Those that go down the rut of long years of negotiation will never get close.
So on India-China trade, could you clarify what's India's stand on allowing Chinese investments in the country? Because the economic survey suggested that focusing on FDI from China seems more promising for boosting India's exports to the US. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the economic survey is an opportunity for economists to come up with new ideas, new suggestions, which they have done. They are neither binding on us and neither are they expected to take care of all the various geopolitical situation and the other aspects of the relationship. While we respect suggestions made in the economic survey, on this particular suggestion, there is absolutely no rethinking in the government. We are cautious about whatever investments flow in from China, and they go through a rigorous scrutiny in the country, and there will be no rethink for the present on Chinese investments in India.
But what about garnering more market share in the global trade environment right now, Minister? Because you are aiming for India to have a more prominent position when it comes to global exports.
Which we can do without investments from China also. We are having good levels of investments flowing into the country. We are making an outreach to further increase the investment flow. And I do not see any risk of losing out on any business opportunities with or without Chinese investments.
What about managing the trade deficit situation, sir? How are you thinking
with
about
China?
it? No, within the country, the trade deficit situation,
well,
which has widened a bit
there are
because
two
of
aspects.
Yeah, gold imports have gone up, shipping costs have gone up, so that's put some pressure on exports. Global demand has been weakening. So how do you look at that trade balance?
Gold imports going up in a way is not a harm for the country. The earlier import duty was abysmally high. It was crazy high, and because of that, there was possibility that gold was not necessarily coming through the official route. I think ever since we brought it down to 6%, it's become much more open market. We saw a spurt in gold import for a short period, but now it's coming back to reasonable levels. There'll be, of course, a little escalated imports, but gold is a value coming into the country, and ultimately it stays in the country, except that which is re-exported. So a trade deficit which results in gold as an asset class coming into the country, not really hurting. After all, otherwise we wouldn't have central bankers trying to back up their currency with gold. The Reserve Bank has 10% of its assets backed with gold. So I don't worry too much when I see the trade deficit number vis-a-vis the gold import number, net gold import after exports. Secondly, India today gets about $130 billion of remittances, the largest remittance in the world. We have a number of non-trade related inflows coming into the country, NRI deposits. So NRI deposits have never fallen down, even in COVID. It's almost like a long-term permanent money lying in the country. While we calculate it as an external debt, but it really is not a debt. It's our own Indians' money coming in through the foreign currency route. Thirdly, we have a good surplus on services export, and that is increasing month on month, year on year. Collectively, our trade deficit position does not hurt the rupee with $689 billion of foreign exchange reserves, the fourth largest in the world. And the fact that they're continuously growing, a lot of investor interest, US interest rates falling will mean a greater flow of money into the country. FDI coming in with greater opportunity and demand. And the increased imports indirectly have one advantage, ma'am. They also demonstrate to the world that there is a demand for these goods and services which are being imported, and encourage investments in those sectors. So that data is actually very important and useful. So increasing imports don't always hurt and don't give me sleepless nights. In fact, I want to market that as market opportunity in India.
Sir, I know you're pressed for time. I'll just take the last couple of questions and wrap up. India-US trade. A lot of American companies are setting up shop in India. India is a huge market for a lot of big tech companies based in the US. Apple has made such a big splash in India. What about Tesla and EVs? Do we see Elon Musk making investments in India?
Well, that's entirely his choice. We would invite all electric vehicle manufacturers to India.
Is he coming in December?
I am not privy to his travel plans.
Okay, there were some reports suggesting that he would be coming in December.
Well, I can't give you a headline on this one because I don't keep his calendar or make his
Sure.
calendar.
Sure.
But India is big on sustainability. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, from the core of his heart, his philosophy is very much focused towards sustainability. You'll recall he offered at COP26 the mission Life, Lifestyle for Environment, where sustainable consumption should be the order of the day. And I hope the developed world, including Singapore, takes note of that, because end of the day, we shouldn't be blaming the manufacturers. If we are going to have consumption waste and wasteful consumption, then obviously that's the source of the environment getting messed up. You can't blame manufacturing, because manufacturing will happen as long as there's consumption. And manufacturer will find the lowest cost denominator to survive in the marketplace. So Prime Minister Modi, I think, has very rightly articulated sustainability from the lens of consumer and the consumption practices. So therefore, electric vehicles comes into that category. And we in India are big on electric vehicles. Our Indian companies are doing us proud. Tatas, Mahindras. Number of foreign manufacturers have also started making electric vehicles in India. We invite all of them. Tesla is equally welcome to come and enjoy the huge market opportunity.
Would you give them the subsidies that he's seeking from India?
We have come out with the electric vehicle policy to encourage companies to come and manufacture in India. We have allowed them two options. One is we give subsidies for those who are willing to come in and manufacture in India. If you are not looking at that subsidy, then we allow a second alternative, that you can import vehicles at a lower import duty to help you create the market and the charging infrastructure. And within that time, you can do your committed investments in the country to make in India. So we have two options. Every company in the world is free to choose which option they want. So for example, VinFast has chosen the option of subsidies. Tatas and Mahindras, obviously being local companies, have chosen the option of subsidies. So Tesla has both options, it's his choice.